Hi everyone, welcome back to Faith and Flour. I'm Robin, and in today's video I'm going to show you how I made applesauce and canned it in a water bath canner. This was something that I needed to do because I bought an excess of apples at the grocery store by accident. There are so many things that I could do with these apples, but I decided to can them with a water bath canner to preserve them for our prepper pantry. It was fun to get out the equipment that I haven't used in a while. I used to do a lot of canning when we lived in North Carolina because we had a nice home garden and tons of blackberries on our property. Back then, I was always making huge batches of blackberry jam and canning things like tomatoes from our garden. But applesauce is a great recipe to use when you are canning for the first time because it is so easy, and I'm going to show you how I did it. This is my favorite resource for canning. This is the Ball Complete Book of Home Preserving. And this is where I got my recipe for the applesauce that I'm making today. I say recipe, you'll see later how easy it is. But it has all of the recipes that you'll need for making things like jams and to preserve fruit and vegetables that are safe for water bath canning. So in addition to all types of fruit recipes, there are recipes for salsa, relish, and chutney, even condiments like ketchup and barbecue sauce, and of course, pickles and tomatoes. The first thing I like to do is to start sterilizing my jars. There's a lot of water in the water bath canner, so it takes a little bit of time. I put all of the jars inside and then turn the heat on so that that can be warming up while I'm preparing the apples. The recipe calls for 12 pounds of apples that are peeled, cored, quartered, and treated to prevent browning. When fruit is cut, peeled, pitted, or stemmed, the flesh is exposed to oxygen and a reaction occurs that can cause the exposed areas to turn brown. So light-colored fruits such as apples, apricots, peaches, and pears are particularly susceptible to browning. Even cherries can darken when pitted, and grapes and several other fruits. And so this reaction, called oxidation, can be prevented by treating fruit with an antioxidant such as citric acid. And so you can buy commercial produce protectors containing absorbic acid or vitamin C, or a mixture of absorbic acid and citric acids. I chose to skip this step for my applesauce, and I had really good results. I think it's a personal preference. It definitely will not affect the taste, just the appearance. Definitely the most laborious part of this project is peeling, coring, and chopping the apples. And so if you decide that you don't want to do that, you can actually just chop up the apples, leaving the peel and the cores intact if you have a food mill. I don't have one, and I actually prefer a chunkier applesauce, so I was willing to put in the hard work it took to do the peeling. And after a few minutes, Kyle volunteered to step in and help me out with this, which also made this a lot more fun. While Kyle finished up the peeling, I could start coring and chopping up the apples. One of Austin's favorite treats is an apple core, so he was helping out with this process too. In my large Dutch oven, I combined the apples with just enough water to prevent sticking, and then I brought them to a boil over medium-high heat. After that, I reduced the heat to boil them gently, stirring occasionally for about 5 to 20 minutes until the apples are tender, and that will vary on the type of apples that you have. After that, you can remove it from the heat and let it cool slightly for about 5 minutes or so. I then used my immersion blender to break up the apples, and as I said, I kind of like a chunkier applesauce, so I didn't make it really smooth, but you can also transfer it in batches to a blender, or like I said before, a food mill if you like it really smooth. At this point, you can add up to 3 cups of sugar to your applesauce, depending on the tartness of your apples. These were Pink Lady apples, and they were the perfect combination of sweet and tart, so I did not want to add any sugar. It really was a happy accident to wind up with these amazing apples. You will also need to add 4 tablespoons of lemon juice. That's not optional, and you also need to make sure that it's the pre-bottled lemon juice from the grocery store. And the reason being that that will ensure that you get the right acidity level to keep your canned applesauce safe. When canning, it's always best to work with everything as hot as possible. So hot applesauce, hot jars, hot utensils and lids, so that everything is sterile. And that way too, when you put the jars into the canner, you don't risk breaking a jar. So before filling a jar, I take it out of the canner where it has been boiling and it's completely sterilized. I empty out the water and then I start filling it. I have a small saucepan of water on the stove for the lids and the rings to keep them simmering while I'm jarring everything. You don't want to bring that to a boil because that might damage the rubber ring that helps in sealing the jars. I ladle the hot applesauce into hot jars, leaving a 1/2 inch or a centimeter of headspace. And so this is the space between the applesauce and the top of the jar, and that's a really important step. Slide a non-metallic utensil, here I'm using a plastic knife, down between the food and the inside of the jar 2 or 3 times to release air bubbles. If you don't remove the air bubbles, you can cause your jars to have a seal failure, and it can also influence the color and storage quality of your preserved product. Then with a clean damp cloth or paper towel, just wipe the rim of the jar and the threads. And this is because particles of food that remain on the rim of the jar can prevent the formation of a vacuum seal. Next, I take out a ring and a lid from the simmering water and center the lid on top of the jar. And I'm using this little utensil that has a magnet on the end. It's a great inexpensive tool that allows me to put it on without having to touch it and contaminate the lid. Place the ring on the jar and tighten it securely without over-tightening it. Over-tightening screw bands can prevent jars from venting and can lead to seal failure. I'll have all of my equipment in my Amazon store if you guys are interested. These are very inexpensive things, and you can usually even find them at a place like Walmart. They're sold in sets along with the water bath canner. I got a great price for mine there. You can always find the link to my Amazon store down in the description box below. When your jars are ready, you can add them to the canner and then just adjust the water level in the canner so that it covers the jars by at least 1 inch. Then you cover the canner with a lid and bring the water to a full rolling boil over high heat. And once the water is boiling hard and continuously, you can begin counting the process time that's specified in your recipe, and for applesauce, it's 20 minutes. It's very important that the rapid boil continues for the duration of the processing time to ensure that the contents of your jars are safe. The water level inside my canner was a little bit high, and I don't want it to be boiling all over the stovetop, so I'm going to remove the 1 jar that I didn't use. Once that was out, the water level was just about right, so I was able to put the lid on and begin the processing time. End of the processing time, turn the heat off and remove the canner lid. Let the canner cool for about 5 minutes. And so this short standing time allows the pressure inside the jars to stabilize and reduces the likelihood that there would be liquid loss that would otherwise occur when the jars are moved. Then you can remove the jars, lifting them out of the hot water with a jar lifting tool, making sure not to tilt them. Don't worry about water on the tops of the jar lids. It will evaporate during the cooling period. Don't try to dry the lids or jars at this point. You don't want to disturb the lids while the seal is being formed. So just place the jars upright on a towel in a draft-free place in your kitchen and let them cool undisturbed for 24 hours. Usually in a very short period of time, you will hear the sound of the lids popping, and that is the vacuum seal being formed. If you don't hear that popping sound, don't worry, but do wait 24 hours before checking the lids. Sealed lids will be concave. That means they'll curve downward, and they will show no movement when pressed. If you find that one of your jars has not created a seal, that's no problem. Just put that in the refrigerator and then use it within the next week or so. And there you have it. It's really very simple. It may seem complicated if you're brand new to water bath canning, but I promise you, once you give it a try, you're going to enjoy doing this, and you'll find that it's a really great way to add to your prepper pantry. Homemade applesauce also makes a great gift. Thank you guys so much for spending your time with me today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to give me a thumbs up. It really does help out my channel. And if you're new here, I invite you to subscribe. We'd love to have you join our Faith and Flour community. It's easy and absolutely free. Before you go, be sure to leave me a comment. I always love hearing from you, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Until then, have a wonderful week.